deserves better than me. Why? How did I become this person? I try to love. Every time it falls apart. I'm unlovable. Is this what I deserve?
Hello, you. You're watching a show about a man who stalks women, breaks into their homes, keeps them in a basement, and kills anyone who gets in the way of his true love. And yet, you kind of like him, don't you? Don't worry, it's not just you. We've all been gaslit by a fictional bookstore manager for 5 seasons now. Joe Goldberg is a masterclass in psychological sleight of hand. He isn't just living a life, he's writing a novel in his head, and he's cast himself as the misunderstood hero in a world full of villains. But here's the thing, Joe isn't a romantic, he's an author of his own lies. Every time he narrates his noble intentions, he's actually editing out the reality of his crimes. Today, we're tearing up the script. We're going to look past that soft-spoken internal monologue to see the man Joe refuses to admit exists. We're diving into the manufactured mind of Joe Goldberg, dissecting the self-fictionalized life of a psychopath and uncovering exactly how the show tricks us into becoming his co-conspirators. Let's get into it. Chapter 1: The Rom-Com Filter. Let's talk about the Joe Goldberg effect. If you take Joe's actions and strip away his voiceover, what do you have? You have a 10-episode horror movie. But the second you add that soft, intellectual narration and a light indie pop soundtrack, suddenly it's a rom-com. Joe lives in a perpetual state of narrative therapy. He takes clinical red flags, like digital surveillance and literal breaking and entering, and filters them through the lens of attentiveness. In his mind, he isn't a stalker, he's a researcher. He's getting to know you because nobody else takes the time to truly see you. He's the only one who cares enough to protect you from your own bad choices. Think about that scene in the bookstore with Beck. To an outsider, Joe is a creepy clerk overanalyzing a customer's credit card. But through Joe's filter, he's a kindred spirit, noticing the tiny, beautiful details of her soul. He uses his literacy and his love for rare books as a shield. If he quotes Dostoevsky while he's standing outside your window, he's not a predator, he's a poet. This is the core of Joe's self-fictionalization. He believes that because his intentions are rooted in love, the methods don't matter. He views social media not as a tool for connection, but as a map of your vulnerabilities. He frames his hacking as curating your happiness. It's a genius survival tactic, because as long as Joe remains the hero of a tragic romance in his own head, he never has to face the fact that he is the monster in yours. He has convinced himself that he's fixing people, when in reality he's just breaking them so he can be the one to glue the pieces back together. He isn't falling in love with a woman, he's falling in love with a character he's written, and he will kill anyone who tries to change the ending. Chapter 2: A Foundation of Fractures. Every author has an inspiration, and Joe's is a nightmare. Psychology tells us that monsters aren't born, they're manufactured in the workshops of childhood trauma. To understand why Joe is so desperate for the one, we have to look at the none, the people who were supposed to protect him. First, let's look at Sandy, his mother. Sandy is the blueprint for Joe's entire pathology. His childhood was a revolving door of abandonment and inconsistent affection. One minute he's her good boy, and the next, he's left alone in a grocery store so she can chase another man. This created what psychologists call a disorganized attachment style. Joe is terrified of being left, so he developed a love that is indistinguishable from a cage. To Joe, love isn't a two-way street, it's a hostage situation. Then there's the trauma of his first kill. Shooting his abusive father wasn't just a moment of self-defense, it was a moment of moral self-appointment. When Sandy told him he was a good boy for pulling that trigger, she effectively gave him a license to kill. She taught him that violence is the ultimate expression of care. If someone is hurting his person, the scythe comes out. And if Sandy broke his heart, Mr. Mooney programmed his brain. Mooney didn't raise Joe, he programmed him. He taught him that discipline and love are the same thing. He literally locked Joe in a glass cage to teach him a lesson. For most kids, that's a prison. For Joe, it became a sanctuary. He learned that being contained is the only way to be safe. By the time Joe hits adulthood, he has a completely warped definition of boundaries. He doesn't respect your privacy because he was never given any. He doesn't see a basement cage as a horror, he sees it as a rare book repair room for people. He's taking the Mooney method and applying it to his dating life, convinced that if he can just keep you isolated enough, you'll finally be safe. And more importantly, you'll never leave him. Chapter 3. The Savior or the Scythe. Once Joe picks a target, the clock starts ticking on a very specific clinical cycle: idealize, devalue, and discard. This is the loop that narcissistic personality disorder thrives on, and Joe rides it like a professional. Phase 1 is idealization. This is the white knight phase. Joe finds a woman, Beck, Love, Marianne, and treats her like a sacred text. She is perfect. She is the one. But notice how he talks about them. He doesn't see them as humans. He sees them as projects. He tells himself he isn't killing Benji because he's jealous. He's killing Benji because Benji is a toxic parasite who is tarnishing her. Joe is the gardener and he's just pulling the weeds. He uses a trick called moral disengagement to sleep at night. He's not a murderer, he's a hero cleaning up her life. But here's the catch. Reality is messy and eventually the goddess bleeds. This leads to devaluation. The moment Joe discovers a human flaw, like Beck reaching out to her ex, or Love being just as violent as he is, the fantasy is ruined. He feels betrayed. How could you not be the perfect porcelain doll he built in his head? His narration, which was once warm and flowery, turns cold and clinical. Suddenly, you aren't the soulmate anymore. You're a liability. You've forced his hand. And finally, we hit the discard. In a normal toxic relationship, a discard is a ghosted text or a messy breakup. In Joe's world, it's a body in a meat grinder. He justifies the kill by convincing himself that you failed him. You weren't the one after all. You were a fake. By killing you, he's effectively deleting a bad draft of his novel so he can start chapter 1 all over again with someone new. Joe is a savior who only knows how to save things by destroying them. He creates a version of you that can't possibly exist, and then punishes you for the crime of being human. It's a tragic, bloody loop that repeats season after season, and the most terrifying part? He's already looking at the next girl on the street, convinced that she will be the one he doesn't have to bury.
Maybe we have a problem as a society. Maybe we should fix what's broken in us.
You're so very special.
Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe it's you.
Chapter 4. Complicit in the Kill. Now, we've talked about how Joe manipulates his victims, but let's talk about how he manipulates us. The writers of You are doing something incredibly sneaky here, and it's called the greater evil fallacy. Think back to every major character Joe has taken off the board. Benji, a pretentious, negligent drug dealer. Peach, a manipulative, obsessive socialite. Henderson, an actual child predator. Tom Lockwood, a corporate monster. Do you see the pattern? The show intentionally surrounds Joe with people who are so vapid, so cruel, or so morally bankrupt that by comparison, Joe looks like a goddamn saint. He's the guy who loves rare books and rescues neighborhood kids. He's the lesser of two evils. This is a psychological shield designed to make us, the audience, look the other way. We find ourselves thinking, well, Peach was toxic anyway, or Henderson had it coming. But that's the trap. By justifying Joe's kills because his targets were bad people, we are effectively adopting Joe's own logic. We become complicit in his self-fictionalization. We start rooting for the wolf because the sheep he's eating are kind of annoying. The show also uses the perspective gap to keep us under his spell. Most of the time, we are hearing Joe's thoughts, the poetry, the justifications, the soft sighs. But every once in a while, the show cuts the audio. It removes the narration and shows us what the rest of the world sees. A silent, dead-eyed man staring through a window for 6 hours straight. It's a jarring reminder that the romantic hero only exists in the voiceover. The second the music stops and the narration fades, the rom-com filter breaks, and we're left staring at a predator who has successfully tricked us into liking him. Chapter 5: Ego Death and the Final Draft. By the time we hit London in Season 4, Joe's narrative is finally starting to eat itself. He's tried to outrun his past so many times that his psyche is literally splitting at the seams. This is where we meet Reese Montrose. For half the season, we think Joe has found a rival, another intellectual killer who finally understands him. But the twist is the most honest thing the show has ever done. Reese isn't a separate person. Reese is the personification of Joe's shadow self. He is the part of Joe that actually enjoys the kill, the part that doesn't need a flowery excuse to bury a body. Joe has spent years trying to maintain the good man fiction, and Reese is the bad man reality coming to claim his royalties. When Joe jumps off that bridge, it's not just a suicide attempt, it's an attempted ego death. He's trying to kill the part of himself that can't stop hurting people. But Joe Goldberg doesn't die. Instead, he wakes up and finally stops lying. He integrates the Reese persona. He looks in the mirror and says, "Okay, I'm a killer, and I'm actually quite good at it." This is the birth of the final draft. In Season 5, Joe is no longer the scrappy bookstore clerk or the underdog professor. With Kate's billions and a team of high-priced fixers, Joe has achieved the ultimate narcissistic dream, a world where his narrative is the only narrative. He doesn't have to hide in the shadows anymore because he owns the sun. He's not writing a tragic romance anymore, he's writing a legacy. He has transitioned from a small-time predator to a systemic monster, proving that the only thing more dangerous than a psychopath with a knife is a psychopath with a clean record and an unlimited budget. Chapter 6: The Apex Predator and the Final Truth. Now, we have to talk about the endgame. By the time we reach the final season, the Joe Goldberg we knew, the scrappy, underdog bookstore clerk with the DIY basement cage, is gone. He's been replaced by something much more dangerous. Joe Goldberg with an unlimited budget and a clean slate. Married to Kate Lockwood and sitting on a pile of billionaire inheritance, Joe has achieved the ultimate goal of any narcissist: total systemic immunity. For the first few years of his new life, he actually tries to stop. He tells himself he's cured. He has his son back, he has power, and he hasn't touched a meat grinder in 3 years. But the problem with a self-fictionalized hero is that he eventually gets bored without a plot. And that's when Bronte walks into the shop. Bronte is the ultimate trigger for Joe's addiction. She's quirky, she's well-read, and she feels like a Beck sequel that Joe is desperate to write. But the final season does something brilliant. It finally stops letting Joe be the smartest person in the room. For the first time, Joe isn't just the one doing the stalking, he's the one being researched. When the revelation hits that Bronte was actually Louise, a woman who knew about Beck and was actively catfishing him to expose his crimes, Joe's good man fiction doesn't just crack, it shatters. This is the moment Joe finally stops negotiating with his own shadow. He stops pretending that his violence is a byproduct of love. He realizes that he doesn't kill to protect women, he kills because he likes the control. He integrates that Reese persona once and for all. He stops being a romantic lead and starts being Darth Vader. He's no longer the white knight saving a damsel, he's the king of a hill made of bodies, and he's finally comfortable with the view. But then we get the ending Joe always feared but secretly deserved. Not a heroic death, not a poetic sacrifice, just a cold, sterile prison cell. And this is where the show's manipulation of you reaches its peak. When Joe sits in that cell reading fan mail from women who still think he's a misunderstood romantic, he looks at the camera and effectively blames us. He tells us that hurt people, and that society, the same society that tuned in for 5 seasons to watch him work, is just as broken as he is. In the final draft of his life, Joe stops trying to convince you that he's good. Instead, he spends his last moments convincing you that you're just as bad as him for liking the show. It's the ultimate act of narcissistic deflection. Joe Goldberg ends exactly where he started, a man incapable of taking a single ounce of genuine accountability, surrounded by the fiction of his own making, finally realizing that the you he spent his whole life chasing was never a woman, it was just a mirror for his own vanity. Conclusion. Hello, you. So what is the final word on Joe Goldberg? Is he a product of his environment? A tragic figure who just wanted to be loved? Or is he just pure, unadulterated evil? The truth is, Joe Goldberg is a mirror. He represents our cultural obsession with the nice guy. The idea that if a man is smart, well-read, and sensitive enough, his red flags are just quirks. Joe didn't fail at being a human being, he succeeded at weaponizing the very things we're taught to value in a romantic partner. He showed us that you can commit the most heinous acts imaginable, as long as you narrate them with enough sincerity. Joe Goldberg is the man who turned his own life into a work of fiction, so he didn't have to live with the reality of what he is. He's finished his book, he's edited out the boring parts, the screams and the blood, and he's lived to see the sequel. He's the hero of his story, and in his world, that's all that matters. Everyone else, they're just side characters. They're just research. They're just you. Thanks for coming along on this deep dive into the darkness of Joe Goldberg. This show has always been a fascinating experiment in how much we're willing to forgive a character if they're charming enough, and Joe is the ultimate test of that. But I want to hear from you. At what point did the rom-com filter break for you? Was it Beck? Was it love? Or are you still, deep down, a little bit on Team Joe? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see where we all draw the line. If you enjoyed this breakdown, do the YouTube things. Hit the like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the dark side of pop culture, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.